Hello, my name is Katie, and this is the Truth for Your 20s podcast. This is where we have weekly conversations with the people I love most from the internet as we navigate all the things we wish we knew when we were 20. My goal is to help you avoid heartache, go further, faster, and have the most joy filled life in your 20s and beyond. Today, we are talking about sobriety, alcohol, and how to talk to a friend who is in a toxic relationship. It all ties together probably a lot more than you may realize. My guest today is Chrystal Cuellar. She is awesome. I found her on the internet, and the joy of having a podcast is you find people you just really admire and who are speaking some truth bombs and some fascinating content. And you're like, hey, I would love to know you more. Would you like to be a guest on this podcast? Thankfully, Chrystal said yes, and we're going to get into it. I know you're going to love this conversation. But real quick, just a reminder, I would love your review on iTunes. My goal is to reach 250 reviews. We are currently at 188. And about 2,000 people listen to every episode. So doing the math, there's a lot of people who haven't left a review. I promise it is super easy. Last week, I asked you to do something kind of funny and super easy. I have teenagers and they always have funny words for cool, like that is dope, that is bussin', that is slaytastic, whatever. If you will take 4 seconds, go to iTunes, hit leave a review, and say your version of something like that, it would make my day. It would be hilarious. And I would definitely share it on the internet and give you a shout out on this podcast. So if you could do that, that really helps other girls find this podcast. So if this has been of any benefit to your life and added value, please help us do the same for other girls on the other side of their net by leaving a review. Okay, here is this conversation.
Hey, how's it going? I'm so happy to be on here with
Yes, I'm glad
you.
that you're going to be here too. Remind me of where you are geographically.
Yes, I am in, well, actually, I just moved. So I am in Round Rock, Texas right now.
Nice. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, Crystal, I just loved your story and was so glad to connect with you through social media. And I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is so inspiring. So I'm just excited for you to share your story. And I know it's really helpful for our listeners, your personal journey and stuff like that. So I would love for you just to kind of give us a backstory.
Yeah, definitely. Well, obviously, my name is Crystal, and I am currently a faith based life coach. And I typically help women just really lay down the idols in their lives. And the two things that I typically attract is women that are struggling to really let go of toxic relationships or just really settling for less than God's best and struggling with binge drinking. So, using alcohol to cope, not necessarily where they are addicted to alcohol, but where that's just kind of like a staple in their lives. And they feel like God is just really telling them to lay that down. And so the way that I just came to where I'm at today is just really going through my own journey with those two things. And so I was somebody that used to just binge drink a lot. And I did that for years and years. And I ended up getting in this relationship I was in for like 10, 11 years. That relationship turned really toxic. And that's really when I found myself in a space where I was really using alcohol to cope. And that's when it just got super bad. And that's also when I really found God. And I'd always been a believer, but I never really knew what it meant to actually have a relationship with Jesus. And God just really led me to this church that I was with for a while, and they really just showed me the love of Christ. And God just, like I always say God wrecked my life in the best way possible, because
He
He
does
just
that.
broke down everything. Yeah, He just broke down everything that was just blinding me, and that was just so toxic in my life. And alcohol was a big one. And like I said, when I towards the end of that relationship, because the man that I was with, he had his own struggles um, with substances and so forth, but his was it was a little different than mine. It looked a little different, and there was just a lot of emotional abuse, and just it was just crazy. We'll just say that. And
Yeah.
so finally, when I really got brave enough and really just had grown in my faith. Really, because I feel like that's the only way I would have been able to do it because I just didn't feel strong enough on my own. I finally left the relationship, and you would think I would have, stopped drinking and all that, but no, I've been in this cycle for a while, and that's actually when I started drinking more, and I realized that I had found so much of my identity in that relationship because I was trying to be his savior, and that was
Girl,
like a
say
big
that.
yes. So that was a big thing I realized. And then I realized that I didn't know who I was without alcohol. So I felt like a limb had just been cut off for me. I just felt like my identity, I didn't know who I was. And there was even some days where I was like, what do I even like? What is my favorite color? Because I was so enmeshed in that relationship and again, like who I was when I was drinking, to the point where I didn't really even know how to have fun without alcohol. It was just really, really interesting. And so, but God really just pulled me out of that. He surrounded me with people that really prayed for me, uplifted me. I had my own coach. I hired a Christian counselor too, and I just kind of went for it. Because after we did in that relationship, like I said, that's kind of when I hit my, I guess, quote unquote, rock bottom. And I knew that if I did not stop drinking at that time, I just knew that I was just going to become a full blown alcoholic and who knows what else, because it's like once you start with one thing, that's typically never enough, right? When you're not
Mm.
getting to the root issue, you just keep
Yeah.
drinking or doing other things. So, but that's my story in a nutshell. And so I have been out of that relationship and alcohol free for probably, I don't know, I think maybe like almost 5 years now. I kind of stopped counting, but just because it's such a big part of my lifestyle now and just what I do. But yeah, so that's my story.
I love your story, and I love it that you're sharing your good, bad, and ugly, so to speak, to help other women. There's so many things I wrote down that I want to come back to and like pull the thread, so to speak, and learn some more. You said, drinking was part of your life for several years, and this relationship, I'm sure, didn't start toxic. And 11 years, that's a long time. So I want if you could
Yeah.
maybe, because you obviously have come to a very healthy place in all of this, and I just want to maybe unpack the responsibility of the reckless lifestyle in the relationship. You know what I mean? Because I think that sometimes it's
Mhm.
easier to point the fingers. Oh, he was a toxic guy. He ruined my life, yada, yada. I'm sure it
Yeah.
takes two to tango. I'm sure there was things that he didn't, that weren't great, but you taking your responsibility, I
Mhm.
think is beautiful. And I think that that's, we can't change others. We can only change ourselves. Right. So I guess if you can just maybe take me back
Yeah.
to the choices you were making, the lifestyle you were living, and how it obviously didn't lead you into the direction that you wanted to go.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was definitely in that mindset for a while where he was the problem, he had the issues, and I was just, but at the end of the day, I truly was toxic myself too, because when you're binge drinking like that and you have somebody else that's, struggling with substances, it just turned into a really toxic thing. And so I really feel like when I found my faith again, when I found God again, was really when my eyes started to be opened to where I had my own convictions, where just God started to revealing to me, hey, like, maybe you need to stop drinking. Maybe, he's not the only problem. And just God just, and I allowed God to really, just come into my heart and to do that work too. And so once I started to let God in, once I started to really surround myself, even just with people that were, growing in their faith and doing better in their life, and they weren't just drinkers, they weren't just the party friends. I really started to just see that I needed to take accountability for my life and for my actions. And so that's kind of just what I started doing even while in the relationship. And I mean, there's different things that I also had to do because I was very codependent as well. And so I mean, I went to meetings, like I said, I had a Christian counselor and I also had mentors within my church that just really helped me see the different blind spots that I had. But a really big piece of it was really just taking accountability and also having compassion, because when you're in a relationship where addiction is like it was, in our relationship. Like I said, I was the one that was trying to be the savior and so forth. Like I really had to learn compassion because I had so much hate in my heart and just again like a lot of pointing the finger. And so just yeah, compassion, taking accountability, and just as far as like different actions that I took, I mean, I feel like they're pretty basic. I really had to, I was in the word, surrounding myself with, good life-giving people. And I feel like that's like the main pieces of it, and just taking care of myself too, because again, being in a relationship like that, you tend to forget about yourself. And I didn't even know what that really looked like as far as self-care because I hadn't done it for so long. So
Did you become a Christian before or after y'all broke up?
no, so this was kind of actually during. So I guess I quote unquote was always a Christian, but I wasn't. It's kind of like when you
Pursuing,
wore the
yeah.
label as a Christian. Like I went to church, on Christmas and holidays, but I never really was walking the walk. So during this relationship, I just kind of felt a nudge to. I was looking for a Bible study. I was looking for something, and I actually had came across a friend of mine from high school, and her and her husband actually had started they were doing like a home church. And so I had reached out to them, and so that's just kind of how everything kind of evolved. And so during that relationship is when I really started like growing my relationship with Christ, and then of course it's only evolved since then. So it was. Interesting.
So you're a new believer, still in this toxic
Mhm.
relationship, and I know it's not overnight. There's this changing, and okay, what do I do on a Friday night now? I usually go to the bar, like all of
Mhm.
that. So talk to me about that. Like, and also, did you break up with him? Like, I need to know more.
Yeah. Yes. So I did break up with him. Towards the end of the relationship, like I said, he really struggled with substance abuse, and the drug of choice that he had chosen. It's, I mean, all of them are bad, but this one was just, it was really extra, where it just was kind of, I felt like I was in danger. And so it
Mm,
was honestly like, it was a big mess on even just leaving the relationship and so forth. But yeah, all that to say, I ended up telling him to leave. He left. It wasn't a clean break because, again, it was very toxic, but that's kind of how
yeah.
that happened. And then, as far as like what I did, I think that was your other question. What I did, I guess, newly alcohol free.
Yeah, just like what that process looked like.
Yeah, definitely. So I, to be totally honest, I feel like at the beginning I did isolate myself. And I don't recommend doing that because I feel like you can still be alcohol free and have a social life. But I was just still trying to figure all that out. And so I did isolate a little bit just because most of my friends, they drank. And there were times where I did go out to the bar and I didn't drink, but I found that that was probably not the best thing because it was just such a big temptation. And so after I kind of crossed that little threshold, I really started just working out a lot. Doing self care and just, I really just like dived into the Bible and really like immersed myself in church and just community and serving. And that's, yeah, and that's what's really helped me. And especially at the beginning, because it's just, I mean, alcohol's everywhere. And especially when that's your main
Yeah.
circle, that just, that mostly was your party, your party friends. That's what really helped me. So,
I love though that you talked about just completely diving into church life because obviously,
mhm.
I don't know you super well, but like if we have passionate personalities, I'm thinking of a quote that says that some of the best people for the kingdom of God are the people that would be causing trouble if they weren't Christians. And I think that's such a
Yeah,
cool quote because if people have
I love
addictive
that.
personalities, but they're addicted to the right things, like that's so exciting. Like our youngest daughter is ultra passionate. And like when she wants something, like I pity the person who gets in her way. Like she is hell bent determined, which is
Yes.
a wonderful quality if it's like channeled in the right direction, right? And so
Right, exactly.
I picture, this girl who you're all into the party lifestyle, right? And then
Yeah,
God's like, I got a plan for her. And while I'm sure it's painful and messy and like, wait, what the heck? You're a new creation now. Talking on
yeah.
podcast about setting
I
people free
know.
from alcoholism. I just love it.
Yeah, definitely. It's been such a wild ride, and I love that you say that because that's something that really the Lord has spoken to me about too. Because even when I was younger, I was very like rebellious, like very just like I was just that kid, and
Yeah.
it's funny because like the Lord is just using that towards such a more positive way and just for the kingdom and so forth. So it's awesome.
One of my friends one time told at first I didn't know how to take it, but something about like I reminded her of Paul, like of the Bible, and he was a little bit of a hellion,
Yeah,
like I he was out murdering Christians before he became a believer, and I'm like, I'll take that as a
yeah,
compliment. And so anyway, I think that you're a Paul too, sister.
yeah. I think so too.
So
Oh,
another
funny.
thing I want to talk about is that these habits are hard to break. And so, it's easy for you to talk us to have this
Mhm,
conversation on this other side of it. But I know in the trenches of, you know, from alcohol every day or how you've been drinking, you mentioned, to
mhm.
this sober lifestyle, like I'm
Yeah.
sure it wasn't a snap of the fingers. So maybe some girls listening and habits look different. It might not be alcohol, it could be a million other things. And sometimes,
Mhm.
there's lots of addictions. We don't have to name them all. But anyway, what would that look like for you? And just
Yeah.
maybe some steps or some grace and that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I will say that I did know for a while that alcohol, like the way I drank, was just unhealthy, and I started to realize that was not how everybody else drank. Because for me, it's like if I had one drink, I was like, "What's the point?" Like if I was gonna drink, I was drinking to get tipsy or borderline drunk, and most of the time, I just got drunk because where is that line, really? Sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Do you know that you can book a call with me? Yep, just you and me. We can talk about boys or faith or finding your calling or what you want to be when you grow up or anything in between. My passion, as you know from this podcast, is to be who I needed when I was younger. And I book online mentoring calls all throughout the week. I have a calendar where you pick a time that works for you and we just set a phone call, date, and make it happen. Usually I'm walking around my neighborhood. You can do whatever you want, but we're going to just get to all the good stuff. Sometimes all you need is an unbiased third party who has your best interest at heart. I want to be your adopted mom, cool aunt, best friend, whatever you want to call me. But let's get real. Let's get honest. I would love to be your mentor. Check all the information at katiebulmer.life. Y'all know I'm all in favor of having fun. Like, have fun always, if not always, is one of my life mottos. But you don't have to get drunk to have fun. This is why I love Curious Elixir's booze-free cocktails. They're actually very good. They have natural adaptations to help you unwind, and they don't make you make questionable decisions or have hangovers. So make sure you check out the discount code in the link of these show notes. Curious Elixirs has become one of my favorite things. I wish they existed when I was 20. But thankfully, they exist for you now, and there's a discount code waiting for you right in the link in these show notes. You talk about, you break all those bad habits and in walking in sobriety now. And I think that that's important to talk about because what I hear from a lot of single people is, oh, well, I can date this way. I can live this way. I can do whatever. And then somehow when I get married, like I'm going to walk down the aisle in a dress and like snap of the fingers, everything changes. And I think what people don't realize is you are becoming your future self, like the habits that you're developing as an 18-year-old, as a 25-year-old, whatever, there's no magic button that on I walked down the aisle. I didn't see a magic button. If it was there, I'll holler, let me know. But
Yeah.
I think there's just this disconnect of the habits you are developing, no matter your age, they go with you in your future and nothing changes if nothing changes. And so anyway, I just wanted to talk about like how exciting that is that you got clean. You got to be this healthy individual as a single person. That's such a gift to your future marriage. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and even when it comes to relationships too, I've definitely had moments where I'm just like, okay, like I'm ready. Like, what's the next step, God? And I've honestly, I've been single since I went alcohol free, but I can say all in God's timing, and also it's allowed me to really just do the work. And like you said, like even just going
Yeah.
alcohol free, how that's going to obviously that's going to be such a blessing for going into dating and relationships and marriage eventually. But it's like there's so much more that God's been able to work with me on in between that, where He's been able to prepare me for that godly marriage. Because if I would have gotten married, I don't know, with my ex, like that would have been a total disaster. That would have been really rough. And so
Yeah.
just seeing, where my mindset has been from there to now, and just even my faith, and just like you said, like my habits and all that, like it's just I'm grateful for all the time that I have had to work on myself and grow in my faith, because I can truly bring that into that godly marriage. And even just being, in the future, like a mother, and things like that. I just feel like that's so, so important.
Talk to me about sobriety because, I think that generally speaking, most people don't have a
Mhm.
problem with a drink or two, if they're of age. But it can very easily become a problem. And so you abstain from alcohol in
Mhm.
general. I guess what the answer to that is, and or just unpack that a little bit because some people will be like, oh, what's the harm with
Mhm.
this? But sometimes there's lines and sometimes they're easily
Yeah.
crossed. Yeah. What have you found in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was never physically addicted to alcohol. I was more of a binger, so I could go out on Friday and then I'd be like drinking Saturday, Sunday, which honestly is very common for a lot of people. They don't see that as a bad thing, but then when people actually try to just totally take that out of their lives, there's an attachment there, and a lot of times that's like an emotional attachment, And then of course we know alcohol does
Yeah.
things to the brain and the body. But as far as like me personally, I honestly, that's a personal conviction that I have from the Lord. Just, I feel like that's just an open door just to nothing that's life giving. And there
Yeah.
has been, I will say, when I was about a year alcohol free, I did get to a point where I was like, okay, I was like, well, I've had a break, and maybe I can just go have a few, and I did, and I really, and it wasn't like I didn't have a bad day, it wasn't like an emotional thing. I was just like, but in the back of my head, I know I did have the thought of, you know what, I just want to be normal and just be able to go have a couple of drinks. And so I did go out that night, and it was interesting because my tolerance hadn't changed, but it really did nothing for me. I remember even
Yeah.
praying before. I was like, God, like I know this probably isn't what you want me to do, but I'm going to do it anyways, being totally defiant. And I was like, but please don't make me feel like, because you know how you have the hangover blues and all that. And I just remember praying this really weird prayer, and it was weird. I didn't even like, I had like a little bit of a buzz, but like it really didn't do anything for me. The next day I felt, just kind of tired, like a little hungover. But I remember just thinking, like, that was such a waste of time. And it just really solidified for me that that just wasn't something I needed in my life. And I don't recommend that either, because like you said, that is a slippery slope, especially for people, for anybody really. I mean, whether you drink every day or not, I mean, you could just have one night where you go and binge drink, and that could lead to who knows what, like, drinking and driving, different things, which I've had my share of
Yeah.
things happen in my life too. And so I would say that's kind of what it's been for me. And as far as, like, I guess giving advice to other people, I would say, because I know we like to Google things, and we like to Google, hey, am I an alcoholic? And we like to, like, find this box, or like even just like this validation that we're not problem drinkers. And I would say, when it comes to that, because I did that too, is just really looking at it and just asking yourself the simple question, like, especially as a Christian, like, is this going to lead me towards God, or is this pulling me away? And two, is this adding to my life or taking away from my life? I think those are very, like, simple questions you can ask yourself, and it doesn't matter what society says, it doesn't matter what your friends say, it just doesn't matter what Google says, but it's like, is this really for you specifically?
Oh, girl, that is so good. Yes. And I think that, I don't think either one of us are here to say, oh, like you're wrong or you're bad. And, I know
Yeah.
a wonderful Christian who hosts a Bible study and they all have line like, yeah, it's personal conviction.
Mhm.
But what you said was so powerful. Like, is this helpful? Is this leading to
Right.
is leading me to be the person I want to become? Or is this leading me closer to God? And like, um, and maybe, in some varieties, in some circumstances, like I said, that girl in her Bible study, but yeah, like, is it
Yeah.
helpful? I think that's such a good question. So, oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit from
Mhm.
alcohol and talk about toxic relationships because this is also a hot topic and you lived deep in the trenches of
Mhm.
this topic. I wonder if you can talk to, first of all, maybe some signs when you realize, like, wow, yeah, this is bad.
Gosh, at the beginning, there was red flags galore that I totally ignored. But I feel like at that time, not I feel, I know at that time, I was very insecure. I was just very green to a lot of things. And I think I was just looking for that person to fulfill voids that really only God could. And, but as far as, like, red flags that I saw at the beginning, I mean, I feel like inconsistency was one. Didn't really want to meet my parents at the beginning. There was confusion. So it was like, okay, like, I thought we were together, and it's like, but behind the scenes, he was saying that we weren't, and he was talking to other girls. And I was like, oh no, it's fine. Like, you're right. We're not really together. And I look back and I'm just like, what was I even thinking? Like, that is not okay. And so that was just at the beginning. And as far as, like, going deeper into the relationship, or like
Oh,
maybe like a few months in, and again, like, it's hard for me to say, but I know I was very needy. I was very needy. And, like, it's just, I don't know. I just look back and I cringe. I'm like,
yeah.
what was, because, we can get like that. And, like, not a lot of people will admit that, but I was a very needy girl. And, like, honestly, like, I feel like I was more the pursuer too, which that's not, I from reading the word and things like that, that's not how we're, the guy is supposed to be the pursuer. And so we ended up, together. And I mean, like, I'm like, I feel like there was so many red flags. And then towards, like, the middle of the relationship, maybe like, well, not middle, maybe like 6 months in, I had actually started finding like drug paraphernalia. And so that was, like, obviously a big red flag. And I remember asking him about it, and he was just like, oh no, like, it's just, XYZ, or it's, and I'll be honest, like, at that point too, like, I was heavily drinking. I was doing, other things too. And so I was just like, okay, because you just think it's just a phase. Like, it's okay. It's not that bad. And so that was a big red flag, because throughout our relationship, that addiction that he had really escalated. Like, I mean, it got really, really bad. And of course, my drinking got worse and worse. But I would say those were the main red flags that I just ignored. And I stayed for so long because I feel like I just had those attachments. I was so codependent. And again, like I said, I was trying to be his savior. And I think I was just, once you're with somebody for so long too, it's like, oh, well, we have the history. Like, it's got to work, right?
No, it's so good. I'm taking notes. Have you heard of the sunken cost theory?
I haven't, no.
It's a my background's in business and marketing, but essentially it's talking about like an investment. Like if you have,
Mm,
let's say you have a crappy rental property and you've sunk thousands of dollars and you keep sinking money, 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 and at some point you became this tension of, well, do I keep sunking money in it to fix it up and return my investment? Hopefully, even though that keeps not working and keeps not working, or do I just sell it and cut my losses? And I've heard that compared to
mm,
relationships, and as you explained in this instance that you had, so much is already invested. We have to keep going. Like, yes, it's getting worse. Yes, I'm finding
Right.
drug paraphernalia and excuses, and
Yeah.
it's not going in a good direction. But I'm just going to keep hoping and like something that's going to change. And nothing changes if nothing
Yeah.
changes. Yeah,
Exactly. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And again, I think I had this weird thought in my head where it's like, again, where it's like the codependency and this savior complex where it was like, what else can I do to make him better or
yeah.
to make him like change? And it had nothing to do with me,
Which is
It really
so
didn't.
much on you, and which is unfair and untrue and
Hmm.
unrealistic and everything else.
Yes.
I wonder if you could,
Yes.
like, because I know there's someone listening who is like, "Oh, she just described my relationship," but it's hard. You hear that and you're like, "Yeah, but I can't quit now," or, whatever. Everyone's
Hmm.
circumstances are different, and there's also the conversation of some relationships are worth fighting for. One thing I want to point out real quick is I think that
Hmm.
I'm all about future thinking. And so if you see good in the future, and no one has a crystal ball, but if they're on a healthy track, okay, they have a drug problem, they're not in their faith or whatever, but they are going to AA classes and they just sign up for a Bible study and they're surrounded by godly men, they are in a good direction.
Hmm.
But as you described in like neither of y'all were headed in
Yeah.
a good direction. So this was not going anywhere good anytime fast. But anyway, talking to that girl, maybe in your
Hmm.
first 6 months of this relationship, when the red flags were flying everywhere, if you could, like, maybe go back and talk to that girl, what would you say?
Well, one, don't ignore the red flags. And when somebody tells you who they are, believe it. I think we fall in love with the potential
Yeah.
a lot. And that's definitely what I could see for me. Like and he was, he was a cute guy. He was, had great qualities and all that, but I made it to be something that it wasn't. That was only half the story. So,
Well, in that same vein, one of the topics I get asked on recently was like, what do you want to hear more of on the podcast? And that was how to talk to a friend in a toxic relationship. And so I guess I'm just curious, say, if
mm,
you had a friend who was in a relationship kind of like you were, it's so tricky
mhm,
because you can't say, hey, you're dating a dirtbag because they won't be friends with you anymore.
yeah.
But yeah, I wonder if you could just give us some tips on ways to help your friend.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a tough one. That's a tough one because I know from
Yeah.
my perspective, of course, like I had friends, I had family members that were just like, no, like, maybe this is not, this is not the best thing for you. And then I had, of course, like family and friends that would almost get like upset with me because it turned into that situation where it was like I was talking about the same story over and over and over again. And so I know that can be frustrating, but I guess I could say, like, coming from my point of view, I did appreciate people not necessarily sharing their opinion, but just really, well, let me say this, loving me through it for one, and two, just lovingly sharing
Mm.
their view on the relationship, but in a way where it was like it was for my best interest from a compassionate place.
Yeah. Like, I want what's best for you. I have
Yes.
questions that this is best for you.
Yeah, exactly. And not putting pressure and just even being like, you know what, if this is your life, this is your decision, of course, like I love you, but I don't like seeing you hurt. I don't like seeing this being, it's just a conversation like that. So I think just coming from a place of compassion and love, opposed to being like, hey, like, you're dumb for being in this relationship. Like, just coming from that energy. And I just feel like that's not the right heart. And people don't respond to that.
Right.
And so, and I can see that in my different relationships that I had at that time, like friendships, family members, and so forth, like the friends that really just like loved me and just spoke life to me, like I was more receptive to that. So,
Yeah, I want to park here for a minute more because I've heard it said it's good to ask questions. So instead of like,
mhm.
you are bad when you're around him, he is blah, blah, blah. Like, instead of like maybe more, hey, I'm curious, do you see a future with him? I'm curious if this is what you always wanted in a relationship. And I'm not sure if that's the right wording, but I wonder if we can just kind of dialogue and maybe help girls come up with
Mhm.
dialogue who might have a friend in a toxic relationship, or these might be questions that they need to hear and I didn't realize they needed to hear. So yeah, like, are there questions, if we phrase it that way instead of telling them, that might have
Mhm.
been helpful for you to hear if you can think back?
Yeah, definitely. And that actually reminds me of a couple questions that was asked of me at that time, and it actually reminds me of a couple of friends that I've had that I've asked them these questions. So yeah, I think just kind of what you said right now is just asking simple questions like, yeah, like, do you see a future with him? Or when like these red flags come up, like I know I had a friend at one point, and it just seemed like. the relationship was he was very controlling. And so I remember just talking to her, and she kind of saw the red flag, but was kind of like, what do you think, type of deal. And so the way I handled that was just, I mean, asking that question, well, hey, like, do you see this working out long term? I mean, I've only been seeing each other for, I think it was like a month or maybe a few months. And so just kind of, and those questions did help because it kind of got her brain going, and helped her to look beyond that moment. And so I would say that's a good question. I would say just even asking, the friend, like, what do you see in your future? Like, what kind of, because I feel like a lot of us
Yeah.
too, we don't really think about that before we get in these relationships. It's like, we don't really think about, okay, well, what do I want? Or even like as Christians, like really praying about it, like, God, like, what characteristics, like, is this godly man that you have for me? Because of course, like in society, like
Yeah.
we have expectations from society, we put expectations on ourselves, and that can just have us in this, that's how we get in toxic relationships, or just, less than God's best. And so I think asking questions is really helpful. And it also alleviates some pressure, like being put on that person too.
Yeah, that's so good. I just think that, obviously, if a girl is listening to this and has a friend in this relationship, she cares about her friend and she wants what's best for her. And so
Mhm.
communicating that first and foremost, like, I love you, I care for you, I see concern, I see questions that you seem to be a different person when you're with him, and not
Mhm.
in the person that I know you to be. And I, have questions. So I think that coming at it with love and compassion, as you said, is so helpful, because yeah, it's a slippery slope. Walking in and with guns blazing, saying he sucks, break up with him, is never going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
I say, yeah, and sometimes too, I guess, like, I want to say this because I know this happened to me, and not to bring like a negative connotation, but like I know sometimes when we do have those conversations with friends too, even if we are coming like from the most loving way, like sometimes they're not immediately receptive to it. But just like, I just want to encourage anybody that's in that position, like kind of on the other side, just to, again, just keep loving them, and just know that they're human too, and that they're entitled to make their own decisions too. And you can't be their savior. There's only so much that you can do. So I just wanted to say that, because I know from me, like I used to have that tendency where I just try to keep going and keep trying to save them, and it's like, well, they're still an adult and they still have to make their own decisions. So
Yes, that is true. And God can redeem anything. And so we hope that even if you try your best, that there's something on the other side. But obviously, we can also be Jesus to each other and be that example and speak truth and speak life.
exactly,
So there's
yes,
both sides to that conversation. But
yeah,
well,
exactly.
I love what you're doing, and I'm so thankful that you're just bringing light to the subject of alcohol and toxic relationships and what that looks like and how to get free, and everything in between. And so I just love what you're doing. Can you tell everyone how to stay in touch on social media and all the things you have going on in the world?
Yes, definitely. So TikTok is my main platform, and you can find me. I don't know if you're going to put it in the
Yes.
show notes, or I'm assuming, but yeah, it's just my first and last name, and then Instagram. And if you go to the link in my bio on either one of those platforms, you'll also find a free community that I have as well. It's called Power Reclaimed Community. So
Okay, tell me about the community.
yeah, the community, it's a free community where that's where I do free master classes. I'll just do, and I do random lives throughout the week. And we talk again a lot about, of course, letting go of alcohol, relationships. We talk about Jesus, of course. And really, the whole point in that group too is just to not settle for less than God's best, and really taking back your power that maybe you've given away, spiritually, to the enemy, but just also like reclaiming who you are in Christ and as a woman, and just standing firm in that without letting these toxic relationships and habits take over your life. So,
I love that you create a community with those kind of goals and
yeah,
conversations. That's
thank
awesome.
you.
Well, we'll make sure we put a link to all that, because I know there's some people listening who'd be like, tell me
Yes,
more about that.
definitely.
Crystal, we unpacked this a little bit, but I would love to ask you the $1 million question before we go. And that is, if you could have coffee with your 20-year-old self, what would you say?
Honestly, I the first thing that comes to mind is just reminding her that she's loved, reminding her that Jesus loves her, and that she doesn't have to find that, like she doesn't have to fill those voids with things of this world. And I feel like that's like a main one, because I feel like that's something I needed back then. Because I was looking for love in all the wrong places, and just even just when it goes to toxic habits and things like that, you're trying to fill a void, you're trying to
Yeah,
numb. And I feel like just love is a big one. And yeah,
we all do that, don't we? We look for love in the wrong places, the wrong
yeah,
boys, the wrong accolades,
I know.
whatever it is. Yes. Well, thank you for bringing light to this conversation. And I'm so thankful that you found true love in the only place that you can find it and then helping other women do the same. So
Yeah.
you're awesome. If you enjoyed this episode, I would enjoy you sharing it with a friend. If you take a screenshot and share it on your social, make sure you give me a tag at Katie Bulmer Life, and I will definitely make sure I respond. And thank you so much for sharing the love. Hey, and if you're new to the podcast, make sure you scroll back. We have over 100 episodes interviewing experts and 20-somethings and everyone in between, tackling all the hottest topics you wish you knew, but maybe just don't. This is called the Truth for Your 20s podcast, and I'm so thankful that you are here.